வந்து பாடும் பூங்குயில் தேன்மழை தோறும் என் வானிலில் ஒரே முறை உன் பேர் சொன்னால் பேரலை மோதும் என் நெஞ்சிலே மிச்சம் வந்து சொல்கிறேன் நேரிலே.
Hello and welcome to Chatz and a Pickle, a podcast where I, Alan, and my co-host Magellan talk about non-struck work in the world of pop culture. Hi Magellan, what's up?
Hey, what's up?
Do people say hi, what's up when they converse in real life? Like, is that how people talk?
Yeah,
Is
of
this
course.
naturalistic? Okay. Hi, what's
It's
up?
extremely naturalistic. Hi, what's up?
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Sorry, it sounded unnaturalistic because I was taking a picture of myself that I'm going to send you later in the episode.
Oh gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Unrelated to what we're talking about now. But I'm doing okay. You know, it's November now. I guess it was November, our last episode too. How are you doing?
I'm doing peachy. Yeah, I was telling you earlier, like I'm feeling that SAD, that seasonal effectiveness. So what does SAD stand for again? I don't exactly remember, and I always word it incorrectly. Seasonal affective disorder. The SADS, the winter SADS. I don't get it as bad as some, but I do get it. And it, like, today was the first real day post daylight savings where it was like waking up to pure darkness and coming home to pure darkness and being like, how do I do anything? Like, so my mood's been kind of like swinging a little bit, but otherwise, like, I'm hanging in there. I had a nice weekend, and this is the best part of my Monday, every Monday, within perpetuity. So, yay. And the reason is because I get to talk with my best friend about works of pop culture that are not struck work. At least while the SAG-AFTRA strike continues to go on. Negotiations are supposed to be happening this week, guys. We don't know. Although the AMPTP did say that this is their last, best, and final offer, which doesn't mean anything, really. But they said it. They put it in capital letters, so who knows? So we hope that the Screen Actors Guild folks are able to get exactly the conditions that they want. And
Fingers crossed.
Indeed. Yeah. So I think we can get right into it this week. This is a listener pickle week. We go in rotation. Listener, me, Magellan. Listener, me, Magellan. With again until the strikes are over. So our listener pickle this week is the video game Venba, which is an independent game released on July 30th. Wait, what's up? Oh my god! Oh my god! I fucked it all up. I knew I was forgetting something. Something fell off base. I was like, I can't get into Venba yet. Back it up. I'm not cutting any of this out. Magellan, what did I forget? What crucial segment did I forget?
Pickle in the fridge. I got a pickle in the fridge. I got my wife all over me. But there's a pickle in the fridge. When my wife is at work, I touch the pickle in the fridge. When my wife is at home, I do not touch the pickle in the fridge. Cause there's a pickle in the fridge. I'm gonna punch you with my teeth. But if my wife says me to that.
Pickle check. Do you have any
Pickle
pickles
check.
this week?
No. My tummy. My.
I wish I played that song at the end of the segment too, so that I could just drop it right there. Pickle in the fridge. Your tummy?
No,
Your tummy's not feeling so good?
My tummy's not feeling so good today. I took a nap at my parents before coming here, just to like relax for a bit, and before coming here, my home, the place where I live, like coming here, like I'm back in the podcast studio.
To the studio, yeah.
God, I wish I could podcast from a studio someday. So I don't feel like going up and getting a pickle right now. I still have pickles in the fridge. I'm eating a cold cut right now that doesn't have lettuce. There's something green in here. I guess there's a hint of lettuce actually, but I just need like more vegetables in my diet or something. I've been feeling like lousy or maybe pickles. I actually told my dietitian was like, "What vegetables are you eating?" And I was like, "Well, I've been getting really into pickles," and she was like, "That barely counts." And I was like, "Damn it!"
That's what a way to say that. That
Wow.
barely counts. That's funny.
Because they're so repeatedly, they're brined for so long that it's
Right.
80% salt. You lose a lot of the nutritional value of a cucumber. And I was like,
that
okay,
makes sense.
but I'm still eating
But
them.
they
I still
taste
love them.
good. I like
That's
to
correct.
eat them, crunch them with my teeth.
That's exactly right. Did you have any pickles this week, bud?
No, it's really quite funny to me how much time I can go without eating a pickle. I did have I had a banh mi the other day, which has like
Ooh.
pickled stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
Which it had cucumber and like pickled carrots, I guess. So that's kind of a, an approximation of a pickle. But no proper pickles. Although this is the time of the podcast where I send that picture that I said I took of myself.
Oh my god, I'm so excited.
So Amanda was abroad this past week, and she got me some souvenirs. One of them was a T-shirt that I just sent you a picture of that's relevant to previous pickles from the show.
Okay.
I sent it to you, right? Okay,
Wow,
good.
that's so cool.
Isn't that cool?
For the listen, oh my! First of all, your haircut looks fan-freaking-tastic. You look so young and fresh. And
Thank you.
handsome.
I just got it. Thank you.
That looks great. Second of all, it is a raven holding a book on John's shirt. A beautiful, beautiful raven, like Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven.
Yeah.
Is he reading The Raven? Is he reading The Bell Jar? That's not.
It's up to your interpretation.
That's not Edgar Allan Poe. That's Sylvia Plath.
Yeah, and then my other pickle check update is I finished Baldur's Gate 3 over the weekend.
Oh my god.
So
that is technically a pickle check.
Yeah, it's a check on previous pickles, so that counts, right?
Hold on. Yes. Wait. What other pickles have we done? Have I touched any of my previous pickles? What do we do? What do we do on here? I haven't played Moving Out. I haven't. I've seen some more birds.
Okay.
God, I really don't touch any of our pickles after I'm done with them, do I? But they touch me.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Yeah, we can think more about that, at the close of this season, I suppose.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful stuff.
But yeah, let's get to what we're talking about today.
Bringing it back to my intro from before, we're talking about Venba this week. This is a listener chatsum from friend of the podcast, Justin, aka Nopad, co-host of Super Smash Echoes, along with my buddy Magellan here. Venba is a independent video game released on July 31st of this year, developed and published by V-Side Games, about a Tamil family who moves to Canada in the early 90s, I believe, and dealing with, common immigrant issues, feeling isolated from your culture, and specifically on the mother, whose name is Venba, and her attempts to maintain that culture through cooking different meals that her mother would make and that she wrote down in a cookbook that they keep in the kitchen. And so you, the player, are mostly controlling Venba, but as the years go on, you also get to control Kaveen, her son, who initially feels very, very isolated in classic first-generation immigrant style, wishes to distance himself from his culture. But as he gets older and becomes a writer, like his father, Pavlan, he realizes, oh, maybe there is something to the culture that my family brought here. And by the end of the game, the father has passed away, and the mother becomes a teacher back in India, and Kaveen goes and visits her, and they cook one final meal together in a really tender moment. That covers it. We're done. That's the end of the podcast. No. So this is actually a video game that a type of game that I've always enjoyed, at least for the last 10 or 11 years. They've really blown up, known as empathy games, right? Games that are specifically going out with a goal of developing a specific story and about a specific person, usually based on the developer's life or somebody that they knew, and putting the player in the hands and in the actions of somebody involved in that story. The game's choice to incorporate cooking as a mechanic brings up many comparisons to the Cooking Mama franchise in terms of what you're physically doing. But it also uses that as another empathy exercise by making you try to remember recipes that your ancestor just didn't properly write down, or that you may not understand the language of. I got quite a kick out of it. I thought it was a really fascinating empathy exercise. I have my qualms with it for sure, but it is a short and sweet game that is successful at its attempt to make you empathize with a culture that we don't think about very often. John, what did you think of Venba?
I really liked it. I think you hit on a lot of the selling points of the game. It's always fun to experience something like a video game that's this focused experience that affirms what video games can do that other media can't necessarily do, which is just to put you in the act of like making minor decisions. You know, there are lots of moments where a character is going to say one of two things, and usually those things are related to each other but not necessarily the same idea. So the story overall is not going to change, like the arc of it isn't going to change, but it's asking you to look at these two statements and decide, well, what these are two things that this character could say in this moment. What do you think they would say, on the one hand? And then on the other hand, like you were saying, the interactivity of like taking the steps in the act of cooking the recipes, which puts you, each recipe is like challenging, or the mechanics of doing it are different from each other to evoke different feelings in you. So like it's not really a cooking game because there aren't consistent mechanics for how to do certain things. You never make the same dish multiple times. You're not really truly like following a recipe. You are interacting with the process of making something from a recipe, and often those interactions operate in different ways depending on who you are, whether you are Venba or Kaveen, where you are in your life, like what's going on around you, what information you have access to. And so really what's cool about it is that the cooking is like a context in which you are playing a game. It's like a justification for this is a video game. But really it's just a way to have you actively engaging with and pressing buttons in the story so that you feel the story more deeply. And I think it accomplishes that really well, and it tells its story and then it's over. So you can play this whole game in the amount of time it takes to like watch a short movie or the episode of a TV show or something like that, which is a selling point, I think. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really beautiful game.
Yeah, and it's got this great art style too. This sort of very like hand drawn, almost like as if it is hand drawn, with pretty simple animations. But they put a lot of detail into the food and into the accoutrement of the house. You know, one of the recurring images is this mask that it probably has some sort of spiritual relevance or cultural relevance to this family, and how that mask comes up again and again in all of the different time jumps. And then by the end, Kevin is being asked to like take the mask off the wall and like bring it for this school show or play that he's making with some friends. And it's detailed, but not overly detailed. You know, it feels relatively simple. And I think that the length also does it a service in that way. Like you said, this was a Sunday morning play for me. I like got up, I had my breakfast, and then I sat down and I played through all of Venba in one sitting. It didn't feel too long at all. It didn't feel too short. And I think this is a great example of why, you know, you can do quality over quantity when it comes to game length. And it's really refreshing to see games of this length, you know, especially just telling you, I was like, I'm playing Spider-Man and it's this big beefy open world game with all these tasks. And it's like, no, in Venba, you just kind of go through the story and then the story's done.
Yeah.
And that's great. It's like reading a short book or something, or like you said, a short movie. Let's dig a little bit more into the culture that's going on here. Obviously, we may or may not be mispronouncing some names. There is no voiced dialogue in this game. There's music and there's vocal music, but so if I'm pronouncing any of the names wrong, I apologize. But from my understanding, Tamil culture has really been blowing up as one of the bigger sort of like culture movements in India, especially since the release of RRR, which is a Tollywood film that really blew up here in the States.
Mhm.
So this is very on brand and uniquely different from what the stereotypical Indian culture is, specifically in the types of food that they make and also some of the music that they listen to. The music comes up in such a cool way. Like there is little to no music, or just like instrumental music when you're doing dialogue in amongst the family. But once you cook, Venba always turns the radio on, and then the music swells, and it's these different vocal tracks for each meal.
Mhm.
I don't know if you've ever been like cooking with your mom before or heard her cooking, but like the music playing while food is being made is like a very immigrant experience thing.
Mhm.
And I think like that is the thing to come to this game for, is like, oh, this is somebody's very specific cultural experience.
Right.
And the more specific is the stuff that I like more, because I think ultimately like the overall plot of like kid doesn't appreciate his culture until he gets older is like a little rote, if I'm being honest. Like
Mhm.
at least amongst like immigrant narratives in the United States, we all went through this. As a first generation immigrant, I went through this. I got teased a lot for bringing Middle Eastern food to middle school,
Mhm.
and like did exactly the thing Kaveen does, where he asks to leave it at home and eat quote unquote normal food. And nowadays, I like only speak Arabic to my parents and wish that I could learn more of it, and always want to learn specifically how to make their food.
Mhm.
Um, and so like it's funny. I played this on Sunday, and Saturday I was hanging out with someone who's actually immigrated here themselves, and we were literally that day talking about the feeling of wishing that your parents wrote better recipe books. And I was like, shit, this game is like doing the thing,
Mhm.
because this is the experience, right? Is your parents make this amazing food when you're a kid and you never know how they made it. And then you get
Mhm.
older and you're like, hey mom, I want to learn how to make, in my case, like gibbe or like grape leaves, the way that you make them. And she's like, oh, you just put a bunch of stuff in a bowl, and you're like, well, how much of it? She's like, I don't know, a bunch. And it's like, well, when I have kids and then kids, like I'd like them to know how much salt approximately. And
Mhm.
most of our parents will just not write that stuff down. And so as
Mhm.
soon as Venba pulls out that recipe book, I was like, let's go. I'm so glad that somebody in this family decided to write a recipe book.
Mhm.
Because these days my mom gets a lot of it online, and she has cookbooks, but she hates using them. She's like, I don't need to follow
Mhm.
instructions, which
Mhm.
again is like what a lot of people who cook regularly do, is you just kind of go by vibes. So it's really
So,
fun. Yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
well, I'm curious about because you were saying one that it feels like kind of a rote story, but also it sounds like it was resonating with you a
Mhm.
bit. So like to what extent did you feel seen in this game or feel like you saw yourself in it versus like, I've heard this narrative before, it's not adding nuance, because I'm kind of hearing you speak to both sides of that a little bit.
Yeah. So just because I relate to it doesn't mean I don't relate to a lot of immigrant stories, right? Like
Right.
I've heard 100 stories of the kid who doesn't like his parents' food. That's surprisingly common. Books, shows, games, etc. do that like all the time.
Yeah.
But it's the specific parts about like this family and how they handle it. Like this moment at the end when you're texting the guy who you're like your classmate or whatever, your buddy who's helping you make the show,
Mm-hmm.
and Kaveen says like, I think that this girl Priya, who's the character based on me, should be eating nothing. I think she
Mm-hmm.
should be sitting. And I was like, that actually hit really hard for me, because like I said, I did do that, but I've never lived the experience of trying to write a character based on my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that part almost feels very meta of like, if you're gonna make this story, and if it's going to be generic, the parts that are generic is if you do what the friend says, like make her eat chicken tikka or a spicy vindaloo. Like that's not
Mm-hmm.
true to your experience. But there's like heartbreak and sadness that is true to your experience. It's moments like when Pavelan gets like assaulted, presumably from
Yeah.
like some sort of hate crime. That's moments where you're like, this probably happened either to the developer or somebody that they know, their father. And those are the moments that really pulled me in and felt like unique and specific. And that is where I think the like empathy game concept succeeds. Because you have to play the balance, right? Like, on one hand, you want it to be relatable to a lot of people so that they get it and that they appreciate it and they feel seen in it. But on the other hand, you want it to be specific so that it doesn't feel derivative.
I see.
It's a hard task.
Yeah, and you want to like there's the archetype, but then there's like really experiencing that and thinking through, okay, but in this scenario, how would this person or this character think or feel or interact with it? That makes sense.
Yeah,
to me.
Exactly. And to get into the sort of the cooking aspect of it, I like that each meal that you make is tied to a big plot beat, good or bad. The first one being the way that Venba reveals to her husband that she's pregnant, because you make these, I think they're called ideals, and they're these little like dough balls that you eventually she like draws a little baby one, and that's how she tells him like, hey, slow down, look at them, you have a I'm pregnant. Which then that's the moment that they snap, jump forward. The son is now a little bit older, and the like heartbreak, I guess, in 1994 of Pavlon, the father, struggling to find a job, then was chasing the kid around. He finally sits down and says, I don't want the same food you always make. I just want to eat pizza. And it's like, again, that's where it hits me. And I'm like, I've literally said that. I'm so embarrassed. Like, this game made me immediately want to. I called my mom afterwards, and I was like, "Hey, I know your art."
This is a game that's like, "Hey, have you called your mom recently?" The game.
Yes, 100%. You ungrateful dick. Like, he's like, "I want to be Kevin, and I want to eat pizza." And it's like, no, in like 10 years, you're gonna regret that so much. And he does. He absolutely does. That, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Well, and from my perspective. Yeah, it also made me feel bad to be like, fuck, I was one of the kids who, like, made him want to eat pizza. Like, just part of the whiteness.
The systemic issue. Yeah.
Yeah. So
but he's convinced to eat this
experience to see.
Absolutely. And I think it's useful. Like, you don't just have to relate to it. I think even if you don't relate to it, it's like, hey, learn a little bit about a culture that you may not be super familiar with, like when you're making putu, I think it's called, and she gets Kavin to try it because it looks like a rocket. That was the funniest one to me, because I kept failing the order of stuff that you're like different flowers that you're supposed to put into the cylinder. And there's this moment where like you basically can hit like submit, like I think I'm done, I think I did it right, and then they reveal it and it's a failure, and you can just roll it back and do it. I love that the game is forgiving like that. But every time you do it, it's like Kavin and the mom and dad like get close, and then they lift it, goes da 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 da, and it just falls apart. I had that happen like 5 times before the game was like, it's 1 2 1 2, you idiot. I was like, I get it. I like that the game nudges you in that way too.
Yeah, I just to speak about like the pure mechanic of interacting with the recipe book and figuring out these kind of food puzzles. I just think it's so smart, the different ways that the game takes approaches to like providing you limited information and then having you have to sort of like solve what is supposed to happen based on your intuition or your own ability to puzzle through something, because it makes each dish a thing that you have to like exert mental effort to understand. So it makes you like really study the dish and really think through the processes of making it, feel a connection to it, and remember it better. So that even from like the first thing you cook, when your husband is waking you up and you're like sick and he's like doing this weaponized incompetence thing, of like, the idlis, I just don't know, it sounds complicated, I'll just have coffee. And you basically have 2 dialogue options that are either like ugh or fine. Either way, you go and you cook it. And like from that first dish, they do this really interesting thing where it's like, well, I know how to make this, but I don't know how to make it using my mom's like cooker, and there's towels for some reason, and I have to figure out where it all goes, and there's like a part of the cookbook that's ripped up, and then after you make it, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of this thing I made. And so then you know, the next scene hits harder when your son is like, I don't want that food, I want pizza, because you're like, no, but I put so much thought and love
Right.
into the things I cook for you.
I
So,
learned
like,
how to make idli. Like I
Yeah.
fucking did the work.
Exactly. I put little faces on it. Come on. So yeah, the fact that they like very strategically give you limited information and make you have this sort of like personal connection with the food. And then also for that, what I love about that too is like what you were describing before, how folks when they're passing along a recipe will often do it orally or through like the practice of making it. And so these recipes kind of like the process of passing them down breaks down when you physically become distant from like the people who your parents, the people who would pass it down to you, because you're not with them on a regular basis, engaged in the practice of making the dish and like making the little mistakes that you make in this game and getting it right and wrong. And so it's like this blessing, like you were describing, that your mom in the game wrote it down. So that also exaggerates this feeling of disappointment when your son's like, I don't want to eat that. And you're like, don't you understand how like how special it is that I have the knowledge to make this, despite like how far we are away from, you know, the person who taught me everything I know. And it just gives you an empathy for Venba and for like parents in these situations, that a child is never going to be able to conceptualize or understand, because as a child, how could you possibly know, you know, how difficult that is, or like the struggle that goes into even being able to carry forward something as simple as knowing how to make a meal. So it was really evocative, like that whole mechanic.
I think the part, and you got to remember that like this is presumably being written by somebody in the perspective of Kaveen, right? Like the child of immigrants.
It feels that way, yeah.
And so when they write like the conversations that their parents are having before they're born, there's something very tender and beautiful about those. Like when we first meet Venba and Babalan, after we make the first meal, they go to bed and they're like, you know, I'll probably get a teacher. The husband's like, I'll probably get some sort of good job here, and then we can move back to India. We don't have to stay here if we don't like it. There's nothing keeping us here. And that's like, then she's like, yeah, I guess, but I'm pretty sick, and like I don't really want to think about that. And it's like the next day or a year or two later that she's like, you know, I'm pregnant, and suddenly they have a reason to stay here. And he's so worried right away that their kids might someday resent them for choosing to stay here, which is like the core of what we all worry our parents feel, is like, do you wish I've asked my parents this. I'm like, do you wish that you had raised us there? Because I know families that had the option and didn't leave, and their kids are very different. They're living full, exciting lives. They've moved on and done their thing. My cousins are like that. But there's also a ton of families, including like most of my mom's side, who came here and, you know, married American people and, you know, have had kids since then, and the generations move on. And it's like, do you still have regrets about that? I think it's something really profound that we never get a like clear answer to in real life. And so it's nice to sort of see the fantasy of like, what if you got to see your parents actually wrestling with that question?
Right.
In between, again, the regular like minute to minute gameplay of this.
Yeah.
So again, that's the stuff that I'm like, oh, this person gets it. This developer totally understood that feeling.
Yeah.
Other things, yeah.
Well, and it makes it, you know, to describe it as an empathy game, it also kind of makes that interesting, because presumably, you know, the purpose of this game is not like completely, here's an experience that I know inside and out, and I want people to play it and empathize with the experience. It's like this game is itself an act of empathizing with, like, from someone in Kavin's position with someone in
Your
Venba's
parents.
position.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. Like, it's not just, hey, here's my life story and play it. It's, here is like a proxy for my parents, for my mother, and the way that I can like enter into that experience and try to understand it, and like her struggle with her roots and her current context is through the food that we shared and that she made for me as a kid. So I just find that really, really cool.
And the game continues along with that theme of like, this is, you know, you're empathizing with the parents. Pavalon is questioning if he should just take a sales job from a family friend. Like, does it feel like a handout? Does he feel like sort of ashamed of that? And then we jump ahead and he's already taken it. And one night he stays out a little late after work. And I think this was one of the parts where I was the most emotionally invested in this family. And I was like, you're going for a walk with Venba and Kavin at night in Canada, looking for her husband. And the conversation they're having is incredibly sweet, even though you know that the thoughts going through Venba's head are like so scary and stressed out.
Right.
And yet she's managing to be such a good parent and be like, hey, Kavin, ask me anything, but you have to speak it in Tamil. You have to speak it in our language, which over and over again comes up, that they like, you know, will write it in different font when he's speaking in their language versus in English. And because she's worried about that, she constantly pushes him, like my parents do and have always done, to like speak in our language because that I will be able to listen to you better. And it's so sweet and good, and it helps relieve the tension that you're feeling while they're walking towards this reveal. Or he's like, how did you guys meet? She tells the story about how the father kind of impressed her, and he's starting to understand his parents a little bit better. You know that this moment's going to imprint on him. And when we see the dad, the first thing we focus on is Venba's face and the way her heart sinks, and you're like, am I serious? And they really pull the wool over you. Like, I really was like, it's unlikely,
like
but
he's dead. Yeah, it really felt like that. Yeah,
or he's cheating on her, or like, which is
something.
unlikely, but like something bad. And it's just, he's smoking a cigarette, he's sitting on a bench, and his face is beat, and they don't have to say a word. They just cut to the next time jump, and you already know what happened, and it's so heartbreaking. And I was like, everything games have had a long history of like putting you in that specific space, whether it's Papers, Please, or Depression Quest, or Papo Yo, like all these indie games that are like the feel somebody else's culture moment. But that very much felt like somebody's real experience, not just their culture, but like their experience.
Yeah, it was really deft what the game does there, because up to this point, you've been making dialogue choices for Venba, and that's the first scene where you might make dialogue choices for Kavin. And it's this like intentional, subtle shift in like whose perspective you're meant to be seeing this scene from, so that it can maintain this air of mystery of like, I'm the kid, I know something's wrong, I don't really have agency in this situation to impact what we're doing, but I like feel this gratitude towards my mom for giving me something to occupy my mind with. And it's like, it's fascinating to me that we picked different things to ask her, because you asked her about how did you meet. I asked her about, well, what did you do when you lived in India? And like substantively, it doesn't change the plot of the scene necessarily.
Yeah.
But the fact that we chose to ask something that was interesting to us or that we wanted to know, it puts you in the experience of Kavin in that scene. And I don't know. I just think that that's like such a brilliant, subtle move of like, where are you putting the choices on the player's part to make sure that you're shaping their experience to be what you want it to be in that moment. So I thought that worked really well. It's
pretty subtle, because then from there we start getting more of Kavin gameplay, And by the end of the game, I think we're doing the final cooking minigame as him. Because the cooking is the thing that's been passed down. Like, it's very simple, but it really works to make you feel like you've shifted perspectives. And from here, things get uncomfortable and relatable because Kaveen has graduated high school and he's going to college, and mom just wants to pack a little bit of biryani gravy for him. And it's worth noting. So you're talking about like the recipes are faded. By this point, the recipe is gone. Like, it's not only been years since they moved, but it's been years since they've been here. So, like, there's no recipe left to read. You just have to dig into Venba's memory and be like, what was the order of spices that go into the biryani? What is when do I put the meat in? And I messed this one up so many times. But it felt so satisfying when I got it. And this is such a good success of the game is you make it and you're like, I made you so much, Kaveen. I made some for you and your friends. You can put it. We'll drive you to school together. Yeah. And he's like, I'm going to school with them. I don't know I don't want you guys to have to like drive all the way to school. And she's like, all right, that's a bummer. I mean, I wanted to see your school, but that's fine. Just take the food. And he's like, no. None of my friends want that. Mom, I don't want the food. And it's like, like the empathy button has been slammed because I worked so hard to get the fucking biryani right. Are you kidding me? It's so delicious. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, and again, a really, really creative moment in that cooking minigame of like how information functions and how memory functions. Because a lot of the way that this game provides information to you in cooking is like exploring the role of memory and how things are passed along. And in prior ones, it's like, okay, I have this written record. It's incomplete. I have to guess at or infer a couple things. But in this one, it's like, I have a memory of my mother telling me exactly what's going in and the order that it's going in. But that memory is inextricably wrapped up in the memory of me leaving my home and her making this for me as like the last time, presumably the last time that I saw her, as far as the game is leading us to believe or showing us. And so like the thing that's hard about this dish is not that you don't have enough information, but it's you have like too much other information. Like I had to play the memories multiple times, not because the instructions were unclear, but because they were followed by like dialogue of my mother being sad that I was leaving, and I'm like, oh my god. And then it's like, wait, what order does this stuff go in again? Oh my god, now I have to listen to that memory one more time. And then my kid's like, I don't want that stuff. And it's like, what are you talking about? You're leaving just like I left. Come on. So yeah, the way that they like enact memory in different ways and provide information in different ways makes every cooking game feel unique. I think that was my favorite of the game, just because it like the like fiction of the scene really hit for me in ways that other ones were like not as emotionally impactful. Maybe they were like interesting. The previous ones were definitely interesting, but this one to me felt the most like moving, I think.
Same. I think because of the incorporation of memories, and like it's legitimately, I think it's the hardest one, because from here they get easy for different reasons. They, either you have your mom with you, or you are the mom and you don't need a recipe. Those are the next two. So this being the hardest, it's like, if you've ever cooked before, whether it's biryani or otherwise, sometimes you know how to make the thing. It's a question of how to make it well. Because like, you could, and she says this early on, like you could throw all the ingredients and spices and the chicken into the pot all at once and it'll taste fine. But for it to taste like it did at home, you gotta be patient, and you have to put things in the right order and wait for the right amount of time for things to heat up. And the patience is worth it. And again, that is why you like feel so accomplished when you finish it. And for Kaveen to be like, I don't even want that stuff. You're like, what the fuck? You ungrateful. And she handles it gracefully. She's like, all right.
Yeah.
I understand. And then she,
And then,
you know,
but then you
turns to the
understand when
husband.
she's in bed later, and she's like, "Well, I'm not doing anything for that kid anymore."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you don't actually feel that way. And Pavlon's like, "Okay, come on," but
Okay.
you get it. You understand where she's coming from in that moment.
I'm obsessed with Pavlon becoming at this point in his life just like everyone's dad, like a fucking clown to deal with. You know, his wife is managing the whole family on her back, and so he's meanwhile like, oh, he's going there because there's a girl. Like he's like, who's that girl in the car? And he's like, that's my boy. That's my boy. Let's go.
Right. He's like over there thinking to himself, I didn't get any of the meat pieces. What the heck?
That part was so funny. It was big Homer Simpson energy. And she's like, Kevin, please eat the food. Like I made it for you. And he's like, and it keeps cutting over to him, and he's like, no meat. I got nothing. You gave him everything. What am I supposed to eat? Just to himself,
Yeah.
like, oh man, he's so
Yeah.
put upon. Like he's not mad. He's just like, oh, well, this sucks.
Yeah. And then they actually do just jump ahead in time, and he's dead.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
I wish they went like maybe should they have lingered on that a little bit more? It felt very sudden.
It just felt like I don't really know. Like, I guess what that accomplishes narratively is it exaggerates Venba's feelings of loneliness, which is important at this moment in the story.
It justifies her going back also.
It justifies her going back, right? So, I don't know. I get it, but yeah, it just felt like, well, now is the time in the story where this guy has to die for the story to keep going, and there it goes. And not to like, you know, if this is reflective of somebody's real life experience, I don't mean to speak crassly about that. It almost feels like the game just doesn't have the space to go there. Like maybe there's something about that that's just a little too sad or painful or whatever it is, or it just doesn't quite fold into the motifs of what the game is trying to do. But it definitely feels sudden for sure. And then this scene, this one's kind of tough. But again, what's cool about this one, Venba's cooking this like huge meal with all these different dishes, and
no recipe book needed.
No recipe book needed, no memories needed. It's intuitive. These are things that she's cooked a bunch of times before. The vibe is like, it's like riding a bicycle. Like, I haven't cooked a big meal for anybody in a while, but I'm so excited that my son's coming to visit, and this is like flowing out of me. I can't wait. And it really again gives you that feeling of like showing you the list, and she's crossing things off the list. They put the big fish in front of you, and it's like, press the A button to slice it up. You're like, all right, cool. Ooh, I'm frying a fish. Wow, this is going to be delicious. I can't wait for my son to come home. And then you pull the phone up, and it's fun how they make you do the texting in this game, where sometimes it's just like, press the A button to send the text. Press the A button to look at the text. Look at the text. Read the text. And your son doesn't come to dinner. Come on, bud.
I can't make it, Mom. I'm not coming today.
That gutted me. That was
the ultimate experience of being a mom is you put all the work in and you don't always get the reward, and you just have to accept that. Like, you don't always get the like payoff, but that's just you keep doing it. It's sad. I mean, that's also just like being a parent, I think, and being someone who cares for somebody else, but it's specifically a thing for moms. And the part that maybe not that like helped cut the sadness of that is I noticed that you could scroll up in the phone when you're texting the text conversation with Kameen. There's a lot of fun little Easter eggs in there if you go through it. And she texts exactly like my mom. It's like kind of eerie. There's a part where he sends her like a TikTok or some sort of video, and it's like normal people be like, and they throw like a ball of dough into the thing, and they just do it. And then it's like my mom be like, and she like slams it into the thing. And he says like, haha, I saw this and I thought of you, Mom. And then she says, who are these people, Kaveen? And he's like, it's a meme, Mom. And she's like, a what? And he's like, never mind. Just forget it. It's fine. It's like he's trying to relate to her. And then you keep scrolling, and every single day she says, good morning, my love. How are you doing? Sometimes he answers, and then sometimes she says, good night. Good morning, my love. How are you doing? Good night. Good morning, my love. How are you doing? Good night. Like 7 or 8 times in a row. And then sometimes she'll send him like cute little gifts or stickers that she found. And he's like, he'll send her one, and she's like, where did you find this? And he's like, I'll show you the next time I come over. And it's like, oh, the stickers. My mom loves those freaking gifts and stickers, dude. There's something in there. There's some sauce. And one of the things that we didn't mention is that Pavlon in his life was a writer. He was a poet.
Yep.
And all of his childhood stories to Kaveen that he would read to him were improvised or written on the spot for his son. And so Kaveen naturally picks up his father's talent and ends up becoming a writer. And in college or after college, whatever. I think
the vibe is he's like a screenwriter on a TV show or something like that. Is what it is.
Yeah. And he's got this guy he's texting, Chris Kendall. Chris Kendall, great name.
Dude.
Chris Kendall's rough.
Yeah. And so like written in such a way where it's like, okay, this happened, didn't it?
Yeah, because it's not cartoon racism. Like it's I just watched. Sorry, I'm not gonna reference Struck Work. Never mind. There's another example of something I watched recently that was like, oh, like racism can be a lot more subtle. It is a little bit like, what should she eat? And it's coming from ignorance. It's not coming from like, I think India is a monoculture, but it is like, what are the things I think of when a girl eats Indian food? Chicken tikka, spicy vindaloo. And immediately, Kaveen texts me back, and he's like, well, first of all, we're Tamil, and she's like me, then that's her culture. We don't eat those things at all. Yeah. Second of all, what if we showed her eating nothing? And you're like, bah. And Chris Kendall's like, I don't know if that's the vibe. Like, I don't know if that depression and reality, the brutal reality of being
sad. The show's
just like have a fun food.
Yeah.
He's like, if this is supposed to be my experience, and I signed up to do this to base it on my experience, then I was bullied for eating this kind of food. And if I am, catering to you guys, then that's what then it makes it seem like my experience was not actually a big deal. I'm not going to devalue my own life experience for this television show. Beautiful moment. I wish we all had the sort of confidence and the opportunity to say something like this.
But then he backspaces over that whole text.
It's fucking brutal, right? The backspace text is the best thing that texting interfaces have done for us in like media. Yeah. He's like, this is so brutal. Like again, like don't want to devalue my own experience. Backspace for like 10 seconds. And then it's like, does he send it as saying like, it's okay?
He ends up saying like, I'll see what I can find, or I'll see what's in the cookbook or something like that. And so then the next couple dishes, or this next one you're doing from Kaveen's perspective, and this one was from a puzzle perspective, I think the most engaging for me, where
because you're learning, you're translating.
Like his mom Venba has fixed the gaps in her mother's cookbook, so you're like, awesome, great. Oh yeah, I recognize these dishes from earlier in the game, and look, she's written in helpful tips and things. But she's written it in Tamil, in a language that her son can speak somewhat, but like isn't fluent in. And so there are these little puzzles of like, okay, you have to put in the grains, and then you have to try to guess like, well, grains isn't the right word. What does grains mean? Or there's one where he flips the words for red and green. And that to me was the most satisfying one of figuring out like what he translated wrong. And again, it's a different way to think about memory and information because like you have a memory of making those dishes from before. Your character now has a memory of these dishes from his life experience, but like he has an imperfect access to the information. So this was an interesting one, a fun one.
I cheated on this one a little bit. There are parts where the point of it is like, you know the word, but you don't know exactly what it means. So like grains actually means seeds. Or there's a part where it's like, and then you put in the thing that is wet. And it's like, well, what the fuck vegetable here is wet? Well, tomatoes release water when they're cooked. So you put tomatoes in. I just like Google translated on my phone, the TV, and like didn't look at it until I got stuck so that I wouldn't have to get it wrong too many times. But I don't even think you need to. Like, I think the game does a really good job of like, okay, you messed up. It's okay. We're not going to start you over. We're just going to back you up like 2 or 3 steps and like play around some more. You can only get it wrong so many times. There aren't infinite ways to do this. Like, technically, even if you didn't understand any of the text in this game, you could brute force your way through every recipe by just continuing to throw stuff in. It's not that technical.
Yeah, there's also like a hint mechanic where you can, at the bottom of the screen, basically have the characters speak out loud to themselves and try to figure it out. Which
it's a pretty dynamic hint system. Did you use it?
Yeah, I used it on this one. Just for the first part of it, the seeds, grains and seeds part. And yeah, it felt very seamless, like and it didn't really feel I don't know what the word is. Like, it didn't feel like in other games where you ask for a hint and a character's like, well, have you tried this? It actually felt like, the character thinking out loud, which was nice.
Right, exactly. So you make that last meal and you get there and the smell and taste brings him back to childhood. Like, he has literally the Ratatouille moment. The scene in Ratatouille where the chef like smells it, and he has that where he's like, oh my god, I remember. And then he has like sad memories too, similar to his mom, where it's like, oh, I remember that mom was crying the day that she made putu, and it's like, oh, because like dad was having job application problems.
No, it's because her mom died.
Oh no, that's because her mom died. Sorry, I'm getting 2 things mixed up. I'm thinking of the part earlier where they over and over again keep showing the rejected teacher application. That's for the mom as well, I think. But like there's a couple of like recurring motifs of like failure to integrate into society, I think, that we haven't really touched on, but the game does bravely show like this family tried to like do the American dream thing. And I think one of the funny but also sad bits was that the dad has like a job interview on the phone, and he says he has years and years of managing cargo and freight or something. And then
and like a degree in physics and stuff. And they're like, well, but you don't have any Canadian experience, so. Which
is racist and probably illegal to do that, to not base your experience from another country. I know people who've had that problem, though. Like, in college, I knew people from Saudi Arabia who their experience didn't transfer. But he also says, like, moving freight and cargo was, I worked at a supermarket in India. Like, I didn't... That's what I translated. It's like, we talked on Patreon a while back about an Uber driver who called his experience like algorithm manipulation. It's the same thing. But then we get the sort of catharsis of the game, which is this final scene where Kaveen takes some time out to go on vacation and visit his mom over in India, and there's so much color and light here. With the father gone, she went back home and got a successful job as a teacher for young children. So he's a writer, but he comes back here, and they have the moment that every kid wishes he could have, right? Which is, Mom, I'm sorry I never embraced our culture. I realize now that it's beautiful, and it makes me unique and special, and it's one of the best things about being who we are. And she's totally understanding. All these years later, all of these like moments of regret and failure later, it's like, well, you got there. That's the other thing about being a parent, is you realize your kids are going to get there, but they'll get it.
Right.
And they cook a meal together. And it's so fun because it's like kind of easy, but the mom like lets you mess up. Like, You're pouring the dough, and she's like, "Oh, honey, you didn't turn the heat down." And you turn the heat down. She's like, "All right, honey, you didn't actually rotate it this time." Okay, well, you got this one right. And then once you get it, I felt like such a badass. Like the idea of making like this great food in front of my mom.
Yeah.
And like killing it. I did like 5 of them in a row. I was like, "Oh my god, I'm so good at this!" I was just going to the rhythm, and it's very satisfying.
Yeah, and that's the only cooking mini game where you actually learn something, right? Where like you practice a thing, and then the processes for the next couple dishes are similar enough that you can be like, "Oh, okay, well, I put the water, then I turn the heat down, then I do this part and that part, put the toppings on it. Oh, this is where I flip it." And you do like 3 different variations. So in this like interaction where you have like perfect information, right? You know everything that you need to know because the person who is the source of the oral tradition of telling you how to make the dish is there with you in the act of telling you. There's like the role of memory in this is only that kind of like nostalgic pleasantness of, oh yeah, this is the version of this that Dad used to like, as opposed to something that's kind of disrupting or making the act of cooking difficult. And so you actually practice and learn something and feel that catharsis of like, oh, I'm getting better at this. Like, you know, I might actually walk away from the game Venba and not necessarily remember how to cook any of the other dishes, but the dosa at the end of the game, I think I could probably tell you the steps because I did it with my mom and she taught me how to do it. And that's kind of cool.
She walked you through it slowly and patiently, and you did it enough times and repeated it that now you're like, yeah, I could probably work my way around making a dosa. It's not that hard. It's so charming and sweet, and it just ends on that like nice moment of like, oh, this can work. And like you were saying earlier, like this is the benefit of being close to your family, is that you can teach recipes in person. Like that's the importance of him coming to India, is like you don't need the cookbook now. Maybe you will in the future if he decides to have kids, but you got firsthand experience, which is, you know, so valuable. Do you want to go get dosa this weekend? Like,
sure, that sounds nice.
Groovy.
Let's do it.
Groovy. Yeah, Venba, it's a really sweet game. Immediately, like I said, I called my mom and I was like, "Hey," she's like, "Let me." I told her I played a game. She's like, "Let me guess. Did you like?" She was like, "Is it about like it's like a sad like immigrant story or something?" And I was like, "Yeah." How did you know? She's like, "You've had this experience before." I was like, "Damn, Mom. Okay." And then I told her all about it. And she's like, "That's very sweet. That's a really cute story." And I'm glad that got you to call early. Also, come over. You were supposed to come over earlier. I was like, "Mom, I was playing this game." Oh man, Venba.
Just on the point that you just made, like it was funny. I was literally thinking, wow, this is like a did you call your mom lately game? And it does this close-up shot where his thumb is like slowly drifting towards his mom and his phone. And the game's like, did you? Are you gonna? So it's kind of a funny
little
moment.
excessive, but yeah, it is funny. They know what you're gonna come out of this game with.
Yeah. No other thoughts really. Yeah, I just thought it was a really nice game. And yeah, I think it like plays with its core mechanics in a clever way and tells a sweet story. So I recommend it.
Yeah, if it sounds interesting to you at all and you want to mess with it, it's on Switch and PC for pretty cheap. So
yeah,
check it out. Thank you to Justin for recommending Venba to us. The wheel has turned, Magellan, and again, it's my time to pickle. Or it's my pickle. It's my turn to offer pickle to you. And I didn't think of one, and I'm going to put it right here. Hey, this is my little segment to tell you that a bunch of stuff has happened before I announce the next pickle. First of all, congratulations to the SAG-AFTRA union for negotiating with the AMPTP and officially declaring the end of their strike. It happened, you guys. They freaking did it. It sounds like, from what I read, that they got a really solid deal. And this is wonderful news, both for actors and writers and creative types all over, and for us here at Chatz Studios. So, a little bit of a heads up, what we're planning right now to do is to finish out this current round of pickles. So that means that I believe Magellan is going to get a pickle after mine, and I think that, and then maybe we'll do one more listener, maybe not, I'm not sure. But that is basically going to be our buffer time with which to watch Star Trek TNG Season 7, because we'll be returning to Trek Chats in a few weeks to wrap up TNG. And then once that is done, because we've owed you guys that for quite a while, we will get right back into Couch Madness. But before all of that, I do have a pickle for next week, and it is the podcast This Is Actually Happening from Wondery Media. Specifically, 3 episodes that I've had Magellan and I watch, or listen to. That's how podcasts work. Episode 260, What If Your Husband Claimed You Were Dead? Episode 261, What If Your Mother Was a Victim of a Secret Government Experiment? And episode 266, What If You Thought Everyone Was Dead? I'm going to give y'all a heads up. When I looked up this podcast, I didn't realize it was as bleak as it is. I looked for something emotional and that it focused on storytelling, and it is that, but it's heavy and deals with some very heavy themes. So if you're listening along, those are the episodes. This is actually happening from Wondery. It's episodes 261, 260, 261, and 266 of This Is Actually Happening. Okay, I'll give it back to the boys now. Bye-bye. What do you think about that pickle and John? Any good?
Yeah, I want to crunch it with my teeth.
Oh, good. That's good. Well, I'm going to let you crunch it with your teeth next week. But first, I have to ask you, where can people find your voice on other podcasts?
You can listen to me on another podcast where I talk about video games, not only recommended by Justin, but with Justin. It's called Super Smash Echoes. We play video games related to the Super Smash Brothers franchise, Super Smash Echoes. Check it out. And also you can read some of my writing on my Substack at notthemagellan.substack.com. I'm noodling around on a new thing, so you might see something soon. I don't know. We'll see.
He's noodling.
Alan, what about you?
I can be found on a few other shows, mainly on scanlinemedia.com. I'm going to be on this month's episode of Novel Not New, a True End podcast, which is their narrative gaming book club show, talking about a chatsome of mine. And I can also be found on the Creature Quorum with Six over there, and the Garnet Wager with Six and Nick, and occasional appearances on other stuff. I was recently on their YouTube channel playing GeoGuessr with Six. And you can also find me every other month on Talking Marketing, amaboston.org. Let me see. Is the new episode going to be... Oh, it'll be like 3 days after this podcast comes out. There's going to be a new Talking Marketing. So look forward to that. And yeah, it's like a fun chat show where I interview marketing people. It's good.
Cool.
You want to give us the plugs on this week, big man?
I would love to. If you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can email us at chatspot@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions for pickles, greetings, whatever it is that you want to put in our email. You can also follow us on Twitter /X at Chatspod. We are at Chatspod there. We are on YouTube, Chatz, a television podcast. You can help the show in a few different ways. You can rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you listen to and rate podcasts. Give us a little review. That would be nice. And the reviews matter because one of my students recently, I told them that I do a podcast, and within moments they were on the Apple Podcast page reading our reviews. And, I was happy that we have about 30-something ratings over there, and we got 4-point-something stars on average. So my student was like, all right, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
So if nothing else, please help me impress teenagers by rating and reviewing the podcast.
Please.
You can also impress teenagers by supporting the show on Patreon, and that's patreon.com/chatspod. $1 a month gets you access to our Discord, where we talk about the things that we pickle here, as well as TV shows and movies and games and other things that we've brought up in previous episodes or that people just want to chat about. It's a fun place to talk about stuff. At $3 a month and up, you get access to twice monthly bonus content on our Patreon. This month, we are going to be doing the thrilling part 2 of our Carly Rae Jepsen RPG heist story, where we played the riff on lasers and feelings called Boy Problems. And then you will also have an episode where we follow up on our coverage of the discographies of Bare Naked Ladies and Metric, which we did a few years ago, because they released some albums since then. And all that's going to be on the Patreon this month, so check that out. We have a website, chatspod.com. Oh, sorry, $5 a month and up. Woo! Almost made a big mistake here. $5 a month and up gets you thanked right here at the end of every episode. Thank you to our $5 patrons: Arthur, Emrys, Jen, Justin, Kat, Lee, Marcus, May Louise, Michael, Pat, Noel, Six, Stefan, and the best for last, my mom. I'm going to make sure to give her a call real soon. Love you, Mom. Anyway, I'm also going to see her this weekend, so phew.
Yeah.
Feeling good about that. At Camillustrator, thank you for our podcast art. Of course, as always, make sure to support the Entertainment Fund as we wait on that last, best, and final offer to hopefully work and be agreed upon. And now, a little something for you to do between now and next time. That is crunch into our Chatsums, our little Vlasic Snackum pickles that are meant to be snack-sized, bite-sized for you to enjoy between now and next time. So, Alan, what's your Chatsum for this week?
My Chatsum is a game that I played for the first time recently, all the way through in the span of a week, so it is Chatsum length. Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty is a fascinating game that was just re-released recently on the Metal Gear Solid Collection, HD Collection by Konami. If you haven't played the Metal Gear Solid games, I probably chatted MGS1 when I played it earlier this year. MGS2 is a much better game with way more to say politically, and it is almost frustratingly prescient in that the game discusses things like AI, puppet, a puppet-run government, mixed genetic modifications, how technology and nanomachines can dehumanize us, the problems with the government and the world and spies and gender, and it's amazing. It's a really fantastic game. I think it definitely has some like narrative bumbles at points, and it's also a game that's clearly like was like hacked to shit because of 9/11. There's like so much stuff where you're like, this is where the 9/11 stuff would have gone if 9/11 hadn't happened, and that's really clear but also really interesting. And I think it's just a really fascinating game, like historically, to see how narrative games have evolved since then. And you can beat it in a week. I beat it in about 13 hours or so, and that was my first playthrough, so it's kind of slow. I do recommend it, and I recommend the HD collection if you haven't played those games already. I hear it doesn't add anything new that people care about, but if you haven't played them, the collection's on PC and modern consoles. So Metal Gear Solid 2.
Cool.
And I'm making sure not to chat some the whole series so that I can still chat some the next one when I play it in like 6 months. But John, what about you? What do you got?
Yeah, I got a Chatsum for you. So recently on a stream, go check out the stream archive, we played Movie Grid, which is a fun thing, www.moviegrid.io, which is a game where you got a 3x3 grid and you need to name movies that match at the intersection of two actors or an actor and a criterion of some kind. I first became aware of these sorts of grids in my travels as a YouTube basketball fan with NBA Grid, but I like this format of little puzzles, grids. So Movie Grid is pretty fun. I recommend it.
Well, John, I want to say thank you for recommending Movie Grid, and thank you also for being the Pavlon to my Venba, because you're always making silly jokes.
And I'm always making you do stuff instead of doing it myself.
I love it, though. Thank you as well to the listener for listening to this episode of Chatz and a Pickle. Peace. 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 Peace.